My name's Austin, and I live in Utah. I'm 28 years old, and I moved about 6 years ago, probably about 100 miles from where I used to live, and I guess that's where my story began. I was never really too much into people. I always kind of did my own thing. I hung out with people here and there, had a few friends, but they weren't necessarily the friends you would go to church with. But I was kind of into the stoner scene. But time moves on. Some of us got into harder things, lost touch, and just grew up. But I ended up becoming friends with a kid in high school who I began to hang out with, and one day he says, "Hey, you know how you can get high off gasoline?" That's when it happened. We did it a couple times one day. I'm alone and desperate as the junkie I am, so I go out to my shed, pick up the gas can. Now please, read this before you decide, oh, you just melted your brain. About 20 minutes go by. I'm feeling dizzy. Then from the corner of my eye, I see someone tap me on the shoulder. I turn around, and it wasn't gone. I see the shadowy reaper kind of float over to a part of my shed where there was about a 2x3 piece of plywood that it began pointing at. Why? I'll never know, but there was a chair right there, so I sat down. It was almost as if my eyes were focusing like a projector. As they did, a picture started appearing. There were images of books with either 1, 2, or 3 letters on each of them as to categorize them, but at the same time, they had repeating letters, and I thought maybe it was kind of an alphabet. It looked like Hebrew or something, but it changed, even more like a TV changing from one network to another, but it had them on all the channels. The pictures had to do with hell, reapers, witches, and ghosts. Loved ones I've lost began talking to me. It's hard to believe you're talking to someone when you can't see them, but it gets worse, as I did not stop going out there and watching it. Now, this house we lived in was my grandparents'. We had only lived there maybe a year before all this happened. We had always heard our door handles shaking. That was normal, but after what happened out there, things got bad. A black circle had been burnt the next morning into my shed. A while later, I had a couple white symbols appear, one in our shed that looked like a skull with a slash, and 2 dashes. Then by our porch that looked like a silhouette of my face. They were some kind of white, gooey, chalky substance. That was the beginning. Things here, things there. But it then came inside the house. There was one entity I talked to pretty regularly. She was a reaper, but she was young and wore a tribal mask. Strangely, for some reason, and I had no idea as to what they were. They disappeared, and I worried something bad happened. There was another girl there among a lot of others that I really doubt had good intentions. I woke up one morning to see that carved into my wood bed frame in big letters was Austin and Mary forever. For what I can only think was just a lack of thinking and boredom, I started looking at my turned off television set when I began to see satanic images in the blank screen. I snapped out of it and decided to go in my backyard and have a smoke. I looked over at my shed as I lit my smoke and saw like 8 people in dark, hooded robes sitting around a fire. I'm about to go over there and tell them to get off my property because I really thought that they were, I don't know, people. I'm told something by one of them, and for some reason it was a good enough reason to go back in. So I'm worn out, going to go down to my room and go to sleep, but I stop in our little TV room where my family are watching TV. I look out the window. I know this all sounds insane, but I see this 7-foot tall muscular reptilian guy. I froze for maybe about 10 minutes, then go down to my room, and after hours to get some sleep. I'm feeling this is getting way too long, so I really just wanted to tell you my story. I've had dreams of witches ever since I was a child, dreams of this happening when I would move into my grandparents' home. I just don't have a clue, and I need some literature or advice. Heck, I don't even want to get rid of them. I don't think I can, but I just want to survive. So thanks for reading. I've had many experiences with the supernatural sort, but I must tell you of the most horrible experience ever. As a child, my brothers and sisters and I had always been in trouble for things none of us had done. Something would be missing or moved, and when our parents asked, none of us knew it had happened. We would console with each other after our parents went away and admit who had really done it. But a lot of the times, it was none of us. Eventually, after hearing a lifetime of noises, feeling like someone was watching us, and being terrified at night, we got used to it and accepted that there was a ghost that liked to get us in trouble. I think the spirit first came to us in Birmingham, Alabama. We moved many times. It seems the spirit followed us all over Alabama and Texas. It did take a while to catch up to us every time we moved, especially from Alabama to Texas. When I was 15, when we moved to Nederland, Texas, my older siblings had moved out on their own by then. It was my parents, myself, and my brother. Things began to happen right away. Items being moved around, noises, terrifying nights full of that I'm watching you feeling. One night, I was awakened by something unknown, but I was too afraid to get up. My bed began to shake. When I did open my eyes, I saw 3 witches, hags, or whatever you want to call them. They circled around my bed at the ceiling of my room. There were either one entity split into 3, or they were triplets, identical and sinister. They circled me, laughing and chanting over and over, "You're mine, you're mine." I finally yelled at them to go away and ran into my parents' room. My parents let me sleep on their floor and gave me the family Bible for comfort. They didn't say then whether they believed me. When we got up in the morning, I felt very foolish. I had always tried to convince myself things like this were just in my imagination. I apologized to my parents for disturbing their sleep and described in detail what had happened. No one really said anything. I think they thought I was ill or something, and I could tell they were worried about me, but not really convinced anything supernatural had occurred. When my dad was leaving the house to go to work that day, he yelled for us to come look. There was a 10-inch wooden cross nailed to the wall right by the front door. The nail was tacked to the very top of the cross. The cross was upside down on the nail. It had rotated on its own. We don't question these experiences anymore. Thanks for reading. I'm submitting my encounter after reading about similar experiences here at Ghost Village. This phenomenon was experienced by me personally, plus my sister and my mother. It happened in 1985 at our home. Our bedrooms were front-facing in our house, and we lived at the top of a J where 2 streets intersected. My sister, who was 4 years younger than me, came to my mom one night saying that she was afraid to go to sleep because she saw red eyes in her window. We inspected the room but saw nothing. I mentioned that perhaps she was seeing a reflection of the porch lights, and I offered to switch rooms with her. We did that the next day. One night, I got into a particularly nasty argument with my mom. I went back into my room and closed the door. I sat in my rocking chair and listened to my stereo with the lights off and eyes closed. It wasn't more than 5 minutes later when I opened my eyes to look at the clock by the door and saw 2 red eyes looking back at me. I froze. There was no physical body and no eye socket, just bright red eyes, seemingly floating in the air. I wondered if this was a reflection, and I moved from left to right to see what would happen. The red eyes followed me. I had to pass them to get to the light switch. I jumped up and hit the light. When I turned around, my room was filled with a thick fog, but the eyes were gone. I was a silly teenager who believed your pastor when he said my heavy metal albums were evil. I remember taking my albums to the patio. By the time I finished, the fog had dissipated. Several things happened that year. The eyes, the strange fog, plus our dog barked at things that we couldn't see. Even the radio in my room would come on out of the blue to a different station. One night, I remember lying in my bed and seeing a shadow figure walk right by me and into the closet. There were no red eyes though, so I don't know if the incidents were related. I never did do a history of the house, but I might look into it. Eventually, my mom saw the same red eyes and asked the pastor to come in and bless the house. We moved 2 years later, and I haven't seen the eyes since then. I've always wondered what exactly it was we experienced. I've seen it, the Black Wolf. It's real. It was in October of 2007. I also saw two other things that day I cannot explain, but especially the wolf. This is the first time I have ever recalled this event in detail to anyone since it happened. It's much easier anonymously. In late October '07, when I was 32 years old, or nearly exactly a year ago, I was home alone all day one day up until the evening. That afternoon, I began to hear a voice speaking to me in my mind. Although it sounded audibly as if someone were speaking to me in a deep voice, using a loudspeaker from outside in the yard, and speaking through a large fan, if you can imagine how that would sound. In response to this, I suddenly began to feel an overwhelming sense of fear, and that fear hit me on and off for the rest of the evening. The sound, as I will call it, because I'm sure it had to be in my mind, was telling me it was my time to go, and that it had come for me. I was always raised up in the standard Christian belief and so on and so forth, so I reasoned that this voice was either A, the voice of God Almighty wanting to take my life, or B, the voice of the devil or Antichrist wanting to do the same. Being the type who definitely wanted to live, I decided on reason B to be what I wanted to go with, and I put a fight up against what I was hearing, though I was shaking in fear. Imagine if you never had such an experience, and all of a sudden one day, you hear an unknown entity talking to you. Corny analogy, but the thing I was hearing sounded kind of like Darth Vader talking through a fan. I was too terrified to leave the house, or even the den of the house which I was in, as I constantly felt like I needed to watch my back. So I decided to set up my own personal barricade to defend myself. I turned on all the lights in the den and adjacent kitchen, and in an attempt to drown out at least some of the fear I was feeling, I drank 2 beers rather quickly that had been left over in the fridge a few days before. Hearing the entity saying it was coming for me, and assuming that meant something really bad, I was petrified, but at the same time, a bit pumped with adrenaline, I guess. I would look around that afternoon and get a glimpse of a shadow darting in parts of the house that the lights were not on in, but were dimly lit by adjacent rooms. I only assumed what I was seeing and hearing was the shadow of death the Bible talked about, aiming for me. Eventually, I came up with a brilliant plan to help ignore the entity's voice. I sat down in the den in my green soft back chair, with all the lights on in the den and kitchen still, in front of the TV turned off, and I picked the guitar and sang. This helped a lot. Finally, some of the fear was lessening, though I was still very frightened. I kept telling myself, okay, none of this is real. I'm just hallucinating and it will go away. I was on no drugs, only the 2 beers I had drank, and I smoked cigarettes. Well, I sat down and played guitar for I know at least 3 straight hours, feeling much better that I could drown out the voice I had been hearing. While playing, I remember distinctly thinking back to all the people I had met, friends, girlfriends, and family that I loved, and calling them out by name. This was in itself unusual, as normally when I play guitar, I'm just thinking of doing the tune well. Anything to get my mind off of what happened earlier in the day. As the sun went down and evening began, everything seemed much better. I didn't hear the voice anymore, until I noticed something wasn't right. This was something I hadn't picked up on earlier. After I stopped playing guitar, and at this time had developed the sense I had won this battle, I looked up into the TV screen at the reflection. Something was not right there. Not right at all. I wasn't in the reflection. Well, there it started again. Goosebumps developed immediately and my hair stood on end. I waved my hand in front of the TV set. Remember, the TV was off and you could see the reflection of my den and kitchen in the screen as all the lights were turned on in those 2 rooms, and could see nothing of me, only the chair I was sitting in the rest of the den and kitchen. My jaw dropped. The fear was back. So I did the only thing my terrified mind could think of. I picked up the guitar, started back playing and singing, and tried to look only at the guitar. The sun had completely set by this time. I remember, I played for a few minutes, but this time could not get my mind back off of being mortified. Why wasn't I in the darn TV set reflection? I dared not to look back at it, but to keep playing. But after a short time, maybe 10 minutes, I looked back into the TV screen reflection. I was still not there. And by this time, I began to see the reflection changing even more. In fact, each time I looked up from the guitar, the scenery in the reflection became a little different than that last time I had looked at it. Another glance up, and I saw several things in the reflection that didn't belong. In the reflection only, on one of the other chairs was a large cardboard box, which of course wasn't there when I looked around. I had no large cardboard boxes. I played guitar, sweating with fear, and then another glance into the TV screen reflection. This time, the box is still there, and I see a coffin. Not a modern-day coffin of $5,000 variety, but an old-time coffin made of wood and cut like they were back in the 1800s, sitting on top of the kitchen table. I cannot describe the fear I was feeling at this time. The guitar had become useless to drown it out at that point. Another glance up from my futile attempt at playing, and I began to see what looked like two small but blurry animals sitting in the chair I was sitting in, and I'm still not in the reflection. Another look into the TV screen after that, and I saw the thing that petrified me the most. The two small blurry animals in the chair I was sitting in were gone. Instead, they'd become large, crisp, well-defined pitch-black wolves with bright white glowing eyes staring straight back at me from the TV reflection. I jumped out of my chair and turned around and looked, but nothing was there, thank God. But I looked back into the TV screen reflection, and it's still there, staring back at me the entire time. When I saw the wolf, I felt, this is it, I'm really going to die, I guess. But thankfully nothing happened. I didn't get eaten, and I'm still here to tell the story. That thing was there in that TV screen reflection for at least 45 minutes, if not an hour. I've no idea why I heard what I heard that day, and saw what I saw that night in the TV reflection, but it was by far the most terrifying day I've ever had in my life. Even more terrifying than the day I nearly had a head-on collision on a wet highway, if you can imagine that, as this event persisted over hours. Finally, my mother came by that evening and I left the house to go visit her and Dad. I told her what I had experienced that day, but I'm sure she had no idea what to make of it. I was just relieved to finally get away from the terror. I don't know what happened or why it happened. I only know what I saw and heard that October day a year ago. I've since wondered, why a black wolf? I could care less about wolves, really. Have never thought of them, and especially black ones. I like cats and dogs, but a wolf? I have no explanation. So, I did an internet search on Black Wolf in spirit, trying to see if anyone had ever experienced anything similar, and found this site, and decided to post my story in full, as best as I can remember it. Other than this, I've never seen or heard anything I couldn't explain. It has me perplexed, and I hope to at least find a reason or cause for it someday. By the way, the large cardboard box I saw in the reflection that night, I've come to believe that may have been a symbol for moving, as soon after that event, my mother moved in with me when my dad had to go to the nursing home. But Mom and Dad are still doing well, and I've lost no friends or family since then, so I don't know what that coffin meant, if anything at all, and especially the wolf. No clue there, but it was terrifying. This happened yesterday, and I need to document this somewhere while it is still fresh in my mind. So I was spending the night with my friend, and we were sleeping outdoors. It was the full moon, and I rested in a wonderful moonbeam. There wasn't a tree or shrub that stood in the way. At around 3 a.m., we were still awake telling ghost stories. I had a flashlight under my chin to make the shadows stand out on my face. In the middle of the story, we both heard a noise that scared the bejesus out of us. It sounded as though an animal was prowling around us in a circle. I shined the flashlight around us but saw nothing. Then suddenly, the flashlight went black. The darkness startled us, but the battery just went dead. I was prepared for this. I went to grab the replacement batteries from beside me, but was shocked to discover that they had disappeared. I opened the bottom of the flashlight. It dumped the batteries into my hand, but those had vanished too. By that point, we were freaked out and decided we'd go to sleep. I just wanted to bury my head in my sleeping bag. but right before I closed my eyes, I saw a wolf-like ghost creature walking in protective circles around my friend. This creature had a tannish brown color with a tint of silver. It was also shadowy, like a spirit. It wasn't of this world, that is for sure. I went to sleep quickly after that, even though I was scared out of my mind. To be honest, I was probably in some sort of shock. I didn't even have any dreams, but I told my friend about this the next morning. Neither of us understood what it meant. I really feel like this is a demon, but I'm not entirely sure. Any thoughts on this would be appreciated. Fanny Pack is back, and he's brought some friends. The background noises of these videos. Just remember that my parents helped out on this sensational video with the background noises that I had to cut out because it was a bit too loud. I'm just kidding, guys. Sometimes the background noises do bother me, but that doesn't even matter. At this point, I'm going to say thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. You may have survived unscathed, but trust me, there will be more demolition where this came from. How do you think this phantom passed away? I mean, it's pretty obvious, like I just listened to a bunch of my narrations and I passed away, and then I became a ghost so I can narrate stories to you. Yep, that is 100% inaccurate, and I'm lying out of my teeth. Please go ahead and share and like this video. Sharing goes a long way into getting out the video to other audiences that may not be introduced to my material. And if they like it for some weird, godforsaken reason, then they'll probably subscribe. So please do that. And, like, comment as usual, because these wolf stories and all these weird-ass things that were happening in these stories were kind of interesting. Are they believable? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Love you so much. I hope you can put up with my stupidity for a long time, because I'm not intending on quitting, but you guys might, so watch out.